Love. Love is what brings us together today. But what kind of love? The kind that is rendered impossible, whether by circumstance most cruel, or by the clashing of unbridled hearts, unwilling to compromise. This is a stirring theme of Eamon's 2003 smash hit chart topper, Fuck It, I Don't Want You Back. A song of such resonance that it inspired R&B artist Frankie to create her own corresponding single, FURB. These songs had a symbiotic relationship in the public consciousness, becoming inseparable, which is ironic considering the subject matter and also the fact that they didn't know each other when they wrote the songs. This was one of many tracks of the noughties that became the basis of mine and my friend's conception of romance when we were in secondary school. But this is not the first musical tale of two quarrelling lovers to grip the world. No. We're going back today, all the way back to England, which is apparently still going on. Let's check. Yep. There it is, guys. It's still going on.
Scarborough Fair is a traditional English ballad. The song lists a number of impossible tasks given to a former lover who lives in Scarborough, North Yorkshire. The melody is in Dorian mode and is very typical of the Middle English period.
Oh. As history stretches on into the future, does that mean the Middle English period gets, longer to fill out the middle even more? That's probably something we should focus all our resources into researching right now.
The lyrics of Scarborough Fair appear to have something in common with the Scottish ballad titled The Elfin Knight. In this ballad, an elf threatens to abduct a young woman to be his lover unless she can perform an impossible task.
This is kind of dark.
She responds with a list of tasks that he must first perform. Later versions invert the direction of desire, with the elf proposing tasks which the lady must perform in order to be accepted as his lover.
I can't believe that the sanctity of the original work has been tarnished by the PC police. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Can you imagine if I was that boorish? Can you imagine?
Meanwhile, a maid lies in bed, wishing she could marry the knight. Upon speaking these words, the knight appears, telling her he will marry her if she will perform numerous tasks, all impossible. She promptly responds with her own list of impossible tasks, and thereby gains her supernatural husband.
Okay, I don't understand how that works, but I guess that's how you know it's true love. Anyway, in 1965, Paul Simon of Simon & Garfunkel discovered this little ditty due to his friend Martin Carthy, and they decided to include it in their new album, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme. But they decided that their version would have a little bit of a twist. Using the lyrics that Paul Simon had written for another song, The Side of the Hill, they decided to weave the lyrics together to create something entirely fresh, and this method is called a mashup. You know when you take Smells Like Teen Spirit and you just rub it on Bootylicious like you're seasoning a steak? Or when Justice plays 5 of their tracks at once and it sounds like what God intended all along? Well, that's what Simon and Garfunkel did. The devils! Apparently this can also be called counterpoint. Now, while Simon and Garfunkel's version of Scarborough Fair didn't quite reach the chart heights of Eamon's Fuck It, I would argue that it's withstood the test of time just slightly better. Anyway, in February of 2019, I received word from this guy.
Daniel Avedon... Why did I say it like that? Dan Avedon let me know of his project with the Super Guitar Bros, their intention to cover Scarborough Fair, and would I be interested in animating a video for it? Dan's initial idea was that it should probably have a medieval vibe, perhaps with knights and maidens and fairies, and I said, what if a horse and a dinosaur went into the woods and kissed? With a big theme of the lyrics being impossibility, I decided that a visual representation, like two creatures you tend to see trying to kill each other instead of falling in love, would be a neat spin on it. Rather than the story being about two lovers who are trying to trounce each other, it'll be the eventual impossibility of them being together because of tragic circumstance. While the origins of the song are about potential lovers having a dispute of some kind, I personally didn't want to go down that route. Because I don't like it when partners fight. Mummy, Daddy, no. That is simply not a subject matter I want to spend a year drawing all on my own. I want to draw love. I want to draw affection. I want to draw the kisses. Dan entrusted the direction of the entire animation to me, and I went out into the great unknown to learn how to draw a horse, and boy did I have to draw a horse. I had to draw a horse so many times. Once is bad enough. But I did, and I've convinced myself that this is all worth it, in readiness for the day that I meet James Baxter and we challenge each other to a duel! When designing the look of our unicorn, hereafter referred to as Uni, there were some obvious inspirations. Firstly, if I hadn't watched Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron before plunging into this project, I would have been truly ruined. I wanted to get the feel of real muscle and weight in these characters, a sensation of their breath and physical tension, so that you can more easily believe that they are tangible and capable of feeling pain. Secondly, the last unicorn of course had a hoof in the design choices, making the unicorns have bulk and weight, but also the elements of classical unicorn design, making them feel both mystical and bestial at the same time.
But for Uni themselves, there was one major character design influence, which was...
Mr. Tucker!
There you are. So you are home. Yes.
Magical protagonists seem to have incredible hair of some sort or another, whether it's unnaturally coloured, or amazingly arranged, or simply iconically scruffy. But long, lank, mousy hair on a character gives off a pretty morose vibe, Full Metal Alchemist used to unforgettable effect. This scene would have been heart-rippingly sad either way, but the choice of this uncared-for mane of limp, muted hair against her pale body really makes the Nina Chimera look especially tragic. So I ripped it off! Now, coming to our dragon, I initially looked at iguanas and raptors for a jungle adept look. I also thought about how dinosaurs and birds have an evolutionary link, and gave her a chicken-inspired crown and throat. And then, culturally, Shrek?
You're a girl dragon! Oh, sure! I mean, of course you're a girl dragon!
If I'm being quite honest, I was basically inspired by a real lack of cool, chill dragons, okay? All dragons in media, alright, are either cool-looking but barbaric monsters, or they're really friendly but they're weird, goofy-looking things. I have always believed that representation is paramount, and I'm sick to the back teeth of chill dragons not looking, you know, draconic.
We will be sending a real dragon to retrieve Mulan. What?
I'm a real dragon!
Listen. Okay, listen. I love Haku, but he is a dog. I love Toothless, gosh knows I do, but the boy is a clam. And even when a dragon does look like a lizard, their movies are usually average at best.
And when there are no more dragons to slay, how will you make a living, knight?
Shut up!
What I'm trying to say is the dragon in Shrek is the only good dragon in modern media. I want a real lizard, a chill dragon, a fun dragon, a dragon that's ready for love. It's like Rex Harrison said in My Fair Lady.
Why can't
A dragon
be more like
a woman?
I beg your pardon?
Someone in the comments is going to ask me what I think about the new Game of Thrones spin-off that's apparently coming next year called House of Dragon or whatever. And you know what I have to say to that? I've been burned before.
In terms of laying out the story, the big challenge was to pace out the action evenly across the song while keeping it going with the changes in the music, all without being rushed. A lot happens in 3.5 minutes of the runtime, so being succinct was absolutely paramount. So, from the beginning, the instrumentals begin a phrase, and then after a brief pause, it resets itself and gets into the rhythm permanently. I thought this would be a great opportunity to open with a brief, enigmatic visual to really grab people's attention. So I went with a metaphor, for our lovers' relationship, our unicorn bravely racing against a blazing fire. This is a pretty dramatic sight to see alongside such gentle music, so a good idea is to soften the action by putting it in slow motion. Then our music begins in earnest, and some unicorns are jousting to the rhythm. We're quickly introduced to the world of our characters. There are unicorns, and they have a violent temperament like other animals. We zoom in on a solo unicorn who is surrounded by coupled unicorns. This one has a smaller horn than everyone else. They have scars, perhaps from attempts to joust, perhaps just from being bullied, and they're partnerless. Now at this point, we're going to get into a touch of the old gender stuff, so I want to say up front, I had my own intentions with these characters, but if you have a different interpretation of their gender that you prefer, that's all gravy. Enjoy this the way you want to. My intention was that Uni is a male, and as such is expected to fulfill a masculine role as a unicorn, to joust for a partner, respect, etc. But he has a much smaller horn than everyone else, so he cannot compete. He thusly thinks, fuck it, I'm out of here. I'm gonna chill in the woods instead of getting the crap kicked out of me. Of course, it's really understandable if Uni is interpreted as not male, as female animals often have smaller horns than their male counterparts, and also just for that sweet gay representation. So our Uni goes into the forest. I'd never made a shot like this before with multiple planes. Doing a shot like this really made me sweat. And meets our forest maiden, who I will call Dre. And Dre sees this small creature and is like, well, I bet he wants to try some acorns. So have some acorns. And Uni then understands that these trees are nourished with the dragonfire, and oh my god, I haven't even talked about that yet. So in real life, there are particular plants, from flowers to trees, that actually benefit from a bit of fire. These are called pyrophytes, and they're pretty cool. There are lots of different pyrophytes, from giant redwoods and sequoias to grass trees and oak trees. I thought it would be pretty neat to have a dragon actually being a nurturing character without neutering its fire breathing, so this seemed like a pretty natural environment for that to work. Anyway, since seeing that Dre has helped grow the oak trees, Uni's like, I can grow stuff too! Now these flyers are not pyrophytic, this is a heliotrope. Heliotrope is a symbol of eternal love. Heliotrope is also a symbol of someone who has religious salvation and devotion. They are also toxic for horses. The seeds are poisonous. The ASPCA's Animal Poison Control Center article on heliotropes lists them as a substance which is toxic to horses and can induce liver failure in equines. I want to shut down right now any theories that any part of this story is some toxin-induced fever dream. No. What you see is what happened. I just happen to think the symbolism in the flower is neat, okay? Anyway, Dre is way into the idea of a companion who can grow stuff with her, especially since her fire can't work on everything, so she's real eager to share her fabulous mega forest with Uni. By the way, I'm so proud of this shot because I did it straight ahead rather than pose to pose, and it looks fine as wine to me. And I'm so pleased with this shot because I'm not good at backgrounds, and I know without a shadow of a whisper of a doubt that this is the best I could do. This is the money shot, people. I think it's worth having a little look at some of these shots before I completed them so you can see how totally out of my depth I was. Truly, becoming qualified for the job while on the job. Sometimes that's the best way to push yourself, my lovelies. And we're coming up on the first uses of masking in this video. You may remember me talking about learning how to do masking in my In Your Eyes behind the scenes. That's when you kind of have a stencil effect in your animation, a moving or growing shape that can be filled with whatever you like a gradient or a texture. Absolutely vital for this shot of a big old wall of flowers. Gotta have it. I mean, this is the money shot. Now, the trick with this petal movement here is that great speed at first grants more forgiveness in terms of what the eye can keep up with, which is to say I didn't have to worry about keeping specific petal placement consistent, if that makes sense. Then, when the motion slows down for the last few frames, taking time to keep petal placement more consistent makes for a more believably smooth motion. Try this yourself when creating a faster slow motion with a host of shapes. It takes time, but it's worth it. I mean, this is the money shot. And here was possibly the most intimidating shot of the entire project for me personally, because I knew I was going to have to animate every single petal by hand. You can do particle effects in Toon Boom Premiere, but I don't have that, so I had to spend a few afternoons carefully animating each little petal for how many frames? This many frames. I don't even want to say it. I did not love that for me. But you must do what needs to be done. I mean, this is the money shot after all. And the petal consistency goes ever on. Uni and Dre look so fantastic, and I love it if I do say so myself. And so they should. Because this is the money. Oh, God, finally some shots where I don't have to do much. And don't even talk to me about this shot. Are we on level with Uni? Are we beneath Uni? Don't ask me. I'm MC Escher. Perspective? I don't know her. Can you imagine if one of these petals had been sucked up through Dre's nose and she'd gotten woken up and sneezed fire everywhere? See, if Scarborough Fair's lyrics got into some comedic stylings, or if there was a hilarious horn section that started up, then that might have been what I would have done here. Remember when I did fun?
I was like, go on!
But now it's time to get serious. The bad unicorns are here. Well, they're not bad unicorns, really. They're more like Klingons. Klingons, you know, they have their ways, but their ways aren't for everyone, you know? I wanted this boss unicorn to be like a type A unicorn, all white all over, that intimidating horn with all those impressive hoof tufts, hoof flares. Because all white unicorns tend to rule the roost in our primary cultural conception of what a unicorn is, and I wanted to pull that idealized concept in a less pure and saintly direction. I kind of wish I'd experimented with giving them like unicorn beards. Maybe next time. Anyway, then murder, and it's all very sad. I'm just kidding, let's go through this very carefully. When something wildly violent is going to happen out of the blue in quick succession, it's important to carefully lay out to an audience exactly where your characters are spatially in relation to each other. Some nice wide shots to establish everything, then some character close-ups so we can tell how they're thinking and feeling. And if you don't do these things in advance, it can be confusing to an audience if you launch into some very snappy shots that imply violence, especially when the colours go all funny and drastically darker. Drink horn! This slow-mo was the one shot I might have spent the most time on because I wanted that motion to be utterly butterly smooth, coupled with the mask that was for the line art only to show the spreading gradient of pain.
What we have here is truly a nice shot. I think it's a good shot. I think it's good.
Ah, when we get gradients in the eyes, we know it's getting real. Look at those anime dragon tears. Anime Dragon Tears would be a good name for a website from 2005. Or now. Oh god, girl, yes, get angry! And then fucking have it, babe. Defend your honor! Sorry, I just truly love a dragon's righteous rage. And gather it all, eh? Eh, Unis, gather it. Sorry, you probably got that already. Big choice here. I was umming and ahhing about whether Dre should actually set her killer on fire, but I ultimately decided that she would look more sympathetic if she didn't and just scared them off. Imagine this last shot if Uni had just walked by a dead unicorn without even looking at it twice. As difficult as this was one of my favourite shots to animate because I just love drama! I wanted to get across a lot of things. Longing for her vanished friend, confusion and shock over her assault, and desperation to stay alive. In doing the shot, I also realised that it bears a striking similarity to another lizard lady who I once brought to life. Ugh, do you ever take a character of yours and then draw them getting murdered and then you realise how much you love them? I love her. I love her. Run to her, Uni! This is a key time to mention, actually, that what really helped my understanding of horse, walk and run cycles was Richard Williams's tutorials on them. Look them up, because I wouldn't have handled this project without them. It's lovely how during the verses that Uni and Dre are together, Dan's voice is multiplied, and when they're apart, Dan only has one voice. I didn't consciously choose to do that in planning this, but it must have just felt right to me. Now I can talk about a big decision I made here. In my original plan for this ending, Uni doesn't sacrifice their life to bring back Dre. Instead, he sheds his tears on her bleeding body to bring her back, but leaves her alone, racked in self-loathing because his kind killed her and she might not want to be around unicorns anymore. I thought this was a decent ending and fitting with the lyrics of them not being able to be together, but after a few months of roughing the video, I decided it would be a far more effective ending to have Uni have to make a real sacrifice to bring back Dre. When you're bringing back a soul, you have to give up your own. Oh god, I loved animating this shot too. Animating hair takes so much time, but lord, it's worth the effort. Okay, this is really coming out of left field, but I love this frame right here. She looks so traumatized. For this great horrified gasp of life, I used truth coming out of her well to shame mankind as a reference. I don't think Dre's gonna be entirely okay just because she's back. She's gonna have to go live with her dragon parents for a while, maybe get some dragon therapy. This is simply canon. Something I do take pride in within my animation is character acting, and some people have asked how a character appears to go from one emotion to another, almost as if they're going through several things at once. What we can do is figure out exactly what emotions we want conveying, and then think about what similarities these expressions can have, so that when we design how they'll be expressed, they'll smoothly turn from one to another. So let's analyse an example of this in action by looking at a scene in a movie. You can find the link to this scene in the description so you can watch it before I break it down here. And go on, it's worth your time. You want to hear about character animation? Let's talk about the Prince of Egypt. Moses, who grew up with Ramesses, is returning to free the slaves from his brother and is letting go of Ramesses as a brother with a symbolic gesture by returning a ring that Ramesses gave him many years ago. What follows in Ramesses' expression is a myriad of emotions as he tries to hold himself together as a strong pharaoh. First, there's a kind of suspicion as he doesn't immediately recognize the ring. His eyes grow wide and the eyebrows arch, and his mouth remains drawn down and unpressed, tightly closed. And he doesn't even turn his head to look directly at it, as if it's a petty trinket and not worth the effort. But then he sharply turns to look at it because he feels he's seen it before. When he picks it up to inspect it, his eyes narrow and his brow furrows, so we can see that he's searching his memory. Then he lifts it into the frame, almost to the centre. This can symbolise how important an object is in a story, and at this moment Ramesses is remembering just how important this ring is. We can see it in his face, his head back a little in shock, his eyes widen and his eyebrows raise, and his mouth drops open in disbelief. The memories are beginning to rush back to him of just what this ring is. Now his brow starts to knit in sorrow as he realises that Moses is essentially letting go of him as family for good. We've still got his mouth open, so the transition hasn't changed the face too sharply. He begins to speak of what he'd hoped, but is unable to go on, not wanting to become emotional or look weak. His eyes narrow again, away from shock and into acceptance of the situation. Then, as he brings the ring to his face, clenching it and his fond memories tightly, he bows his head down. The brow fully furrows, his eyes squeezing shut. This isn't necessarily anger yet, this is a look of pain. He's trying deeply to bury the pain he feels, the frustration of being pharaoh, of what he believes he must do now, not to be the weak link in the dynasty. And then, with his head still bowed and his brows remaining at what I'll call maximum plunge, his eyes snap open. We've now moved from a look of pain to an open-eyed glare to scornful anger. So you can express all of these different emotions in wildly different ways, but if you go for a subtler degree in them, blending one emotion to another can be easy. Let's look at Dre here, discovering the flowers in front of her. Her first expression is wide-eyed surprise. She's calculating what it must mean that she's back from the dead, that these symbolic flowers are laying before her. She realizes that Uni must have picked them for her as a loving gesture and, finding her dead, resurrected her by giving up his own life, leaving the flowers behind. The brow is raised, spines fanned, and the mouth is open in shock, the neck drawn back as well as the hand, almost as if she's afraid of the flowers. Then she slowly exhales to steady herself, her chest falling, the eyelids drop as she understands what's happened. She raises her head a little to try and keep composure, while her horns flatten out in dismay. The brow remains furrowed but lowers gently and the mouth closes slowly to again show her holding her composure. She slowly uncurls her hand and gently lifts the plants to her. So in this, we're going from a rather chilling surprise to heart-aching realization and then a sorrowful acceptance. I hope this shows you that blending emotions together can be pretty easy if you keep the expressions subdued and relatively similar. Now, if a character like Roger Rabbit was doing a scene like this, it would probably turn out pretty different. Although, you know what, now that I've said that, that sounds pretty interesting. I'd like to give that a go, actually. Ain't animation grand? So, at this point, I feel like I'm supposed to say, so what have we learned? And I'll get to that in a sec. First of all, it is such a pleasure to get to animate for such talented musicians as Steve, Sam and Dan. And in the halcyon days of April, I'd hope to meet up with Steve and Sam at a convention or something, maybe early 2021? I don't think that's gonna happen now. Maybe it'll happen a lot later in the year, or maybe the year after, or maybe the world's oceans will burst into flames. I don't know. I was so happy when the collaboration was released, and the way you guys have responded to my animation with your kind comments and your fan art and your reaction videos, which I really do value, like all of this, like it makes me feel like the things that I do, the efforts that I make are worth it. So thank you so much. The day that I did, well, it was the release day when I did that live stream to kind of celebrate and promote their album just a little bit. That was one of the highlights of 2020 for me. Like, I had so much fun doing that with you guys. It was great. But making something this big on my own was really difficult. And it was only as difficult as it was, not because of anything that I was being asked to do, because I'd made longer animations than this before and I thought that this wouldn't be so difficult, but because of the creative choices that I was making, and secondly because I was working 2 other part-time jobs at the time. And I won't go into details, but this is definitely the hardest I've ever worked on anything in my life, and I really started to feel it. Now, from very early on, I knew exactly what I believed it needed to be for it to grab people, and I calculated correctly, and it's certainly very satisfying to see what felt like creative mania pay off in such a thorough way. I don't know if it helps me to make healthy decisions down the line, but it certainly is a validating ego boost. I wish that I could make things like this all the time, full time, in a responsible way. I just don't know how to do that yet. I'm a little nervous of taking the risks that it might require to do that. That's on me. Another thing that I'm learning as time goes on is that I'm increasingly desperate to entertain people in a variety of ways, and this is going to be obvious to anyone who's been keeping an eye on me over the last few years. I think I have a real addiction
to entertaining people, whether it's making them laugh or making them cry or making them gasp, making them get up and dance, making them part with their money to see atrocious things, and whatever Let's Plays make people feel. Anger? Statistically, anger. Side note, I may have an addiction just to attention. I mean, that has to be a part of this, right? Some of these attempts to entertain hit, and some of these miss, and all of them feel like fleeting moments to win some spaces in people's memory before my energy depletes again. My main point, though, is that when I'm graced with an opportunity, a paid opportunity, to direct something that's straight from the heart to more or less a guaranteed crowd of a couple million people, I have got to give that opportunity everything I've got. I can't take that for granted, and that's why I just threw myself at this. I was like, oh, I don't know when something like this is ever going to happen to me again. So, like, I know how lucky I am to get to do stuff like this. I've got to give these chances everything I've got. I have a feeling that getting a decent wage to make just whatever you want is not a frequent occurrence in the animation industry, or perhaps any industry. Or maybe I'm really wrong, but it's just not the impression that I get. In fact, the impression that I am getting with increasing terror is that telling whatever story you want to a decently sized audience is only going to get harder and harder as one monolith company just swallows up all the competition and makes it just like everything else it owns. But I digress. So, I don't regret making this animation at all, of course. Something just needs to change within the way that I work for me to continue making things like this in the future without me feeling so spent. And I think that's going to be difficult for me to get a grasp on. But I think I'm going to get there in the end.